Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another week of Whiskey Roundtable. My name is Scott Fitzsimons, and the onus again falls upon my shoulders to push this car away from the garage and get it started up. Tonight is a very special night here in Sydney. We're watching this in the future. We are now into our 12th week of lockdown, and I can't go to the pub. So tonight we bring the bar to us and delve deep into the psyche of whiskey bars, cocktail bars, service and all that sort of thing, so that I can try and learn once again how to make any sort of cocktail, let alone a gin and tonic, which the version of gin and tonic I'm making right now is about 12 weeks worth of Chinese whispers away from what a gin and tonic is meant to be. I'd like to introduce two people from the panel tonight. We've got Andy Milne from Bondi of the South Trade Company, looking very white and background as he always does. I think there might be a photo on the back wall today. I can't really tell. And Matt Bailey with his nice big microphone tonight, the only really redeeming feature of Matt Bailey, apart from quite a nice hoodie as well. If Sullivan's Cove, if you're listening, your cellar door is missing a hoodie. I'd do a stock take on that. Someone's nicked something there. But as I mentioned, we've got a couple of people pulling in from different parts of the hospitality industry, different venues at the moment. But it's about time they came together and started something themselves. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. We've got Tom Price, the Baxter Inn, probably best known in what he's doing there, and Ben Hickey, who's done a lot of things, but I don't have time, so I'm going to say the Roosevelt, because that's where you're sitting right now. Director of a new venue that hopefully will be open. I don't want to jinx anything by the time that we are all allowed to get out and play again. Gentlemen, welcome to the roundtable, and apologies for taking you away from doing important things this evening.
It's okay. Thank you.
Thanks very
it's
much,
an excuse to not be coated in sawdust and attempting to break things up.
Excellent. So, very, very quickly, Ben, you look like you're at the Roosevelt there. Is that correct, or is that your home bar?
No, unfortunately. Well, it's a bit of both, really. Home's around the corner, so any excuse to get out right now. So, yeah, at the Roosevelt, hanging out. Was with Tom earlier on, but we decided it would be socially distant and go back to our respective hoods. So, yeah, chilling out here at the Roosevelt.
Beauty. And Tom, that doesn't look like a corner of the Baxter I'm familiar with, so I dare say you are in a newly
I'm
created
above ground, which is actually basically like the one thing I set my rule is that we have windows. I'm actually seeing like what's going on outside. I can see the weather, and I am just planning on getting a slight tan while sitting in a bar, which I think is something that doesn't happen in many city bars.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say the reception at Baxter's today is excellent. I can see you nice and clear. Look, let's dive straight into this. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and I want to get into both your personal careers and that sort of stuff. But it's this lockdown has been in many ways a little bit more brutal than the previous one. You know, there was a sense of learning, and just around the corner we're going to be out in the 2020 shenanigans. This one has got a little bit like a sledgehammer that keeps giving. You guys have are building a venue to implement after that. After the lockdown comes out. So, like, what has that been like in that process of lockdown, trying to create something that can't actually trade during that period?
Well, it's been a bit of fun. Basically, this opportunity came up in that magical time between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, when we'll say goodbye 2020, hello 2021, happy days are ahead. We were smart enough to chuck in a clause saying it's not going to kick off, and landlord's not going to get any coin until we're up and running, which is nice. So basically what it did is gave us basically an extended fit out period. So what it meant is instead of chasing our tails and trying to get as much done as possible, we've been able to spin it out a little bit and do a hell of a lot of it ourselves. Yeah, bye, Steve. And yeah, we've given us a chance to go hands-on. Turns out that between us, we can muster enough talent together to drill some holes and cut some wood, and yeah, made it fun and cheap.
Yeah, but pretty much the reason that Bunnings has run out of timber because we keep cutting so much and messing up. I'm definitely becoming good at like that, learning to measure twice and cut about 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. Make sure it's upside down or back to front, Tom.
did that like 3 times.
The bit that always gets me is making sure the drill is drilling in rather than out, and when you can't figure out why it's not going in.
Yeah.
Look, for those who aren't familiar, it's not just the two of yourselves. And we did see a cameo just in the background there. I think it's someone else who might be involved. So, from an outsider's point of view, the About Time crew, and you were both directors of this new venue. It's a bit like a Sydney supergroup of venues, and not that we haven't seen that before with venues, but that seems to be the way that really good venues in Sydney work, is through that collaborative sort of thing. So, who else is involved, and how did it all come together? And sorry, finally, my mother has joined the stream because the pubs are done. Finally, Mother, it's only taken you a year, but good to see you. I hope you're doing well.
Big up. So what happened is it's basically a social thing. We've all known each other since days of King's Cross nightclubs. I was involved with Keystone back in the day at Kit and Caboodle, where I met Tom at Goldfish, and Steve Davis, who you saw run across the background there before. He was doing his thing at Piano and Trademark, and we all became mates then. Would hang out, drink, obviously, talk the shit, and we've always, waxed lyrical about having our own place. And when the situation came up, it was I figured why the hell not, and get everybody involved, and many hands make light work. Lots of different skill sets coming involved. Beyond the Tom, myself, and Naomi, who's my partner here at the Roosevelt. We've obviously got Steve from Opera Bar. We've got Shannon, who works in sort of import-export with booze, and we've got Oscar, who has been working as with Stone and Wood. So he's our beer guy.
He's our independent beer guy.
For another year.
We've had to change some of the items on the menu.
Our 100% independent beer list has got a little asterisk next to it at the moment.
So we were presented with this opportunity of a venue that was almost just a basket case or a test case for us to try. It's in the building at Frankie's that's going to get knocked down at the end of next year. So we were like, we might as well throw in and see if we can put up with each other for a year running a small little business together. And that's kind of what it is. And that's why it's called About Time, because it's all about time. We don't have much of it.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. Where is it? We'll get into what is it. So it's, you put a lot of effort into this. I can see it there behind you. But so it's literally by the end of next year, the bulldozers will come in for a metro station, and that'll be it.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, we're basically going to be kicked out of here on New Year's Eve next year. So we're going to have a New Year's Eve party. That's going to basically.
Can I RSVP with tickets to that, please?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the hottest ticket in town.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of the last Luau thing from years ago, of that whole sort of like a bar that only exists for a certain lease period and then it's done. It's a kind of moment in time. I like that idea though.
Yeah, it's kind of and it's out of our hands as well. It's not like that the perpetual Persian rug sale sort of thing. We're closing. It's the government's going to come in and it'll be no more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really exciting for us. As I say, with the second lockdown, we kind of saw it coming when we were, doing paperwork and stuff. But it's actually, obviously does limit the amount of time we have in. The longer this drags on, but it has given us a lot of having a bit of free time from our regular jobs. We've been able to sort of throw ourselves into the fit out and build, which has been a huge experience in itself. So
started shopping at Bunnings for my clothes, which is just great.
They're not very forgiving the sizes either, are they, Tom?
But I feel like I get better treatment at when I get stopped for roadside, the lollipop women stop me.
Yeah.
I'm wearing tradie gear. They kind of move me on a little bit quicker, which is kind of nice.
It's a sexy look, man.
Instant cred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna have to be our bar uniform as well. Just the tradie cat boots and high beers.
So I'm going to throw to Matt and Milne in a bit, but just to sort of wrap up this sort of intro bit,
Sure.
The Baxter's is obviously an iconic whiskey bar. It doesn't just do whiskeys though; it's got a very strong cocktail element. The Roosevelt, I think is probably almost the other way from a consumer's point of view. It's a really great cocktail bar, but then it's got, like, as we can see behind you, a really stonking whiskey list. So where does About Time fit? Like, when we can go and we walk in, what's going to be the experience of what am I going to drink at About Time?
So what we've sort of done is, obviously there's 7 of us involved, all with personalities, skill sets, likes, dislikes. So basically we want to reflect all of us. So obviously, Tom comes in with the whiskey side of things, myself a bit too. We got John O'Carr on board as our mate. He's actually going to be the full-time guy, GM. He'll be rocking the cocktails. Another mate, Shannon of wine, Oscar of beer. We basically, without being too over the top, just want to throw a little bit of all of us into it. It won't be a overwhelming whiskey focus, but obviously, Tom and I are both passionate about it, so we'll make sure what there is good, and more than enough reasons behind the bar for a whiskey freak to come in, check it out. But we, the whole thing, short and fast, quick and dirty. We're not going to get tied down too much, and just basically, if we decide to do something different, we can decide to do something different. Keep it loose and free.
Mm.
Yeah, basically have fun, man.
Yeah, sure.
100%. We've just lost Tom there, but I'll wait for him to come back. That's the beauty of working in live construction sites. Who knows?
Exactly. The Wi-Fi installs coming next week. I think he might be backing up hotspotting off his phone.
Yeah.
So dive into your career a bit more. So how did you end up where you are here with whiskey?
Sorry.
Basically, I like drinking. I like working hospitality. Did the usual sort of progression, pub job at uni. Pub had a cocktail bar, worked in cocktail bars, worked in nightclubs, sort of got around. It was interesting. Tom dropped off some Ardbeg Alligator before, which is a whiskey that I remember very fondly from working at Pocket Bar, where we were sort of, along with Stitch Bar, did a lot with Ardbeg and Glenmorangie. Basically, as your career goes on and you get to expose to some new, cool, interesting things, you get pretty excited and you go off on little tangents. And I think most bartenders by nature are quite nerdy and love learning about stuff. So sort of started going down that rabbit hole. And then, as the consumer perception changed over the years, we had an opportunity, to go with it. I always think the bar, when I talk about whiskey is, when we started bartending, it was, you knew you were working in a good bar when you walked in and there was 20 different flavored vodkas behind the bar. These guys have absolute peach and absolute mandarin. I'm like, fucking voila.
That pub test still stands true, I reckon.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
Yeah, so
I thought it was more the lemon myrtle variations now.
Yeah. And these days, you go in and, you got your 3 vodkas, if that, and then you've got your wall of whiskey. So it's been, lucky that, consumer perceptions changed, and it's changed along at the same time that my like for different spirits has changed. So, going from being cocktail focused to having a lot more Skittles flavored vodka. Yep, nice. Red Skittles my favorite. Yeah.
Can we do a barrel aged version of that? I know, can we get Jono onto that?
There's a request for barrel aged Skittle vodka.
Done.
You got to start with vintage Skittles, like the ones you find at the bottom of a backpack or something like that have been kicked around.
Bag-aged Skittles.
Yeah.
They come with the yeast ready to ferment.
Yeah.
Sugar and yeast all in one. But yeah, my interest in whiskey sort of came when, consumer interest in whiskey came and sort of dragged me along, and, being nerdy, sort of read and learnt and drank, and yeah, here we are.
I think I was also kind of very lucky for me. My interest did peak around the kind of time I started working in a bar, Eau de Vie, which had probably a pretty wide selection, and just being kind of awestruck by the amount of whiskey that was out there, and still and it's kind of that thing where for me, I just was like, I have no idea, and it excited me in a way. And I definitely can also remember the first time I tried Lefroy 10-year-old when I was 18 and working behind a bar and told someone that's fucking disgusting. And it wasn't I'm by no means a puritist. I didn't start off being like, oh, single malt's the best. I kind of had to work my way through it and tried everything, and started blight, went to sherry, went to kind of peat, and you kind of fluctuate through those flavors. And I think it's kind of I've been lucky enough to be around it for over 10 years now. So to get access to whiskies and try everything and see how much, I don't think I would have expected the amount of whiskey to be around that I did when I worked at Eau de Vie. I thought that was all the whiskey in the world, and now it's oh wait, that wouldn't even touch the sides at some normal bars these days.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I think we're obviously, everyone in the industry to a degree is lucky, but if you land at the right bar, I mean, not to encourage bartenders to sample willy-nilly, but there's always bottles behind the bar that you at some stage or the other get to taste your way through, and compared to someone that
doesn't show up a little straw test or a little
exactly
taste. You got to know what you're selling.
Exactly. But compared to someone that might be getting into whiskey from purely a consumer point of view, you got your Dan Murphy's catalogs and the latest release from the big guys that sort of may make the mainstream. But compared to that, when you walk into a bar and there's all these sort of things that you would normally never come across, and part of your let's call it your salary package is the ability to taste and enjoy something that would normally be out of your reach.
I want to ask a question about that that progression of how whiskey within the context of your bars has changed over the years, because I've seen that change even just from the other side of the bar of how people order it. And I remember years ago, 5 years ago, you'd sit, or longer ago, you'd sit at the bar at Baxter, and you'd hear certain orders, or you'd hear certain requests, and you'd sort of go, I've never heard that before, or why would anyone ask for that? Or that's a stupid question, kind of thing. And then I guess it's changed over the years. What have you seen from your end, I guess, on a macro level then, on how consumers approach whiskey at the bar?
I guess back in the day, when Diageo was your key on premise, pretty much all your bars, even if you're working in a nightclub,
shout out Simon.
Even if you're working in there, you had your, if you were going to put Smirnoff and Gordon's and whatever in the rail, a lot of the contracts you had to list that, the classic malt range on the back bar. So even bars that probably wouldn't be that interested in putting up single malts on your back bar, they suddenly were ranging, your Dalwhinnie and your Clyneish and your Talisker and your Lagavulin.
So classic malts sort of really kickstarted that. Yeah,
I definitely think so. That maybe it was just because it was coinciding when I first started bartending, but suddenly
it's true. They absolutely changed the whiskey scene forever.
I feel like there's a lot of bars that I was working in that wouldn't normally stock something like that, but because of nothing wrong at all.
Rich coming from you, Simon. Rich coming from you.
Yeah, and Simon, if you just dig at a few more of those Mortlach 16s to throw my way as well. That'd be great.
Ben's actually got a few. I stole some over last time I was there.
Yeah, it's my one of my top 10. So I've got a couple of bottles of the odd Flora and Fauna kicking around.
Yes, good whiskey.
So good. But yeah, so suddenly there were those whiskies there, and as being a young impressionable bartender, you taste them, and you're like, suddenly that opened your palate and your mind, and I think it was your 5 Diageos plus your Glenlivet 12 was kind of your standard single malt back route bar, and I think suddenly, and this was back in the time when a lot of the consumers, they didn't know anything about this. So suddenly it was in their face, and we could, explore that with the people that came to the bar.
I think one of the things I've kind of found is the way in which the market can shift so quickly, based on kind of, and I wouldn't even say it's necessarily based around marketing, but I think awards and kind of like literally, I can tell you that time of like never selling Sullivan's Cove to then one day selling out of it within about 4 days because it won an award. And this was when I worked at the Roosevelt, and kind of getting, like, I've always felt like kind of bars get access to stuff that most people can't get access to it for a little bit of time, and like we're more likely to buy, like, I can remember getting bottles of Barora, the official bottles of Barora, about 6 or 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, that were maybe $650, and we were like, oh, this is a cool distillery that no longer exists, and now has this status that in, I'd say, 6 to 7 years has just become almost like folklore and impossible for anyone to get. And people do still want to try, but it is also just this thing of, we can't, like, as soon as it's won an award or it's no longer available, people instantly are drawn to this kind of idea of like, oh, it's got to be the best.
Yep. Yeah, I remember we had a bottle of Port the Bor at Roosevelt with you, Tom, and we, I think it was something maybe 35 a nip or something, and I think we had half a bottle, and there was a table that came in and like sunk pretty much the remainder of it. We're like, man, those guys spent so much money on whiskey. Yeah, I know. Yeah. We're like, yeah, making money. And
I think I tell this story quite a lot, that probably the most expensive bottle of whiskey I've ever bought was a Port Ellen 9th or 10th edition. And it was $1,400. And that was more than a week's salary. And I was like, this was a stupid amount of money to spend on a whiskey. But I opened it and I drank it with some friends, and it was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. Do I wish I still had that bottle? Not necessarily. Do I wish I still had the money that the bottle could get me now? Probably.
So you want your cake and eat it too? Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure. You want to drink it and also sell it. Yeah.
It was also interesting what Tom was saying about the Sullivan's Cove, because it was just before my time here at the Roosevelt. Tom was here, and we did a dinner for Sullivan's Cove. I mean, I probably
30.
Yeah, so it would have only been about 10 people in there. And I was going back through our till system the other day and looking at sales, looking at what we paid for everything. And I think that bottle of the French oak was $375. And, I know a point there not long after we're paying, $1,800 a bottle for it, and, still sells. But it's, and then, I remember being at Pocket Bar a bit before I was at Roosevelt, and got offered a bottle of, can't remember which of the card series it was, but $500 for a bottle of Japanese whiskey.
Yep.
And, I love, we even had some, on the way, Chichibu and a few other things at the time, which was, considerably cheaper than $500. But $500 for a bottle of Japanese whiskey, like, what the hell? As much as it's tasty, no one is ever going to buy this. So, passed on it.
And trends come and go, like Japanese whiskey trends, and the as soon as Sullivan's Cove French Oak won the award, and as much as trends come and go, Speyburn is forever, so you can always serve Speyburn at the bar.
I couldn't get it at Baxter's last time I was there for some reason.
They keep on selling out. It's impossible to keep them.
It's as soon as they put in the Speyburn Slammer, it's just really flown off.
We actually had to buy a 4.5 litre bottle just to keep up with demand on weekly supply. Like that actually is quite a good point. Is like, one of the weirdest things about the Baxter Inn is like, there can be a night where we'll get new allocations in, and like sometimes if we recommend it to the wrong guests, it can move in a night, like an entire bottle. And so we kind of have guests coming in going, oh, do you have this? And we're like, oh, unfortunately we don't. We did, but we've sold out.
Yep. And
it's one of the hardest things to manage of like, do we hold back stock? Do you allow stock to just anyone can buy whatever you want.
Yep.
And it's like, how do you manage that sort of allocation when especially some of the bottles aren't available to the general public, or they're bottles that we've kind of searched for? I know Ben buys a lot of stuff, like he travels to Japan quite regularly and will buy a lot of those sort of the little Yamazaki distillery only bottlings and things and stuff that like you can't find elsewhere. And it's one of those hardest things is, do you let it sell to one person, or do you kind of want to meter it out?
Yeah, and you want people to enjoy it, but I mean, the easiest way to limit how much you sell is obviously price. But the people who really want to taste it, you don't want to be ripping off. Like you want to make it reasonable for them. But we often have we do a lot of whiskey tastings here, and a lot of it's social groups, bucks, and a few other things like that. A lot of people really into their whiskey, and one of the questions you always get is what's your favorite whiskey out there? And obviously a very loaded question. Things like it coming back to like Chichibu, probably my favorite distillery of all time. And people are like, oh man, we should all get a round of that. I'm like, well, it's $90 a nip. And a lot of the time that puts them off. But then again, you got people.
What's your second favorite?
Yeah. But then again, I made the mistake of I had 14 guys, and I made the mistake of saying it's Yamazaki Sherry Cask 2016 edition, thinking no fucking way they're going to drop $350 on a nip, which is was a fairly reasonable price for what it was. And lo and behold, they bought the whole bottle. And I'm like, that's great, but I wish I could have held on to some of that bottle so I could have metered it out for people who would have, come in and want to appreciate it.
Yeah, but that's what, $7,000 in nip pricing. I mean, you've just
don't get me wrong. From a business point of view, yeah.
I think
to be honest, I think that was for double. It wasn't much.
I think that's such an important thing is like, growing, like if a whiskey is fantastic and it's going to be a well-regarded whiskey, you want as many people to try that as possible, because that might open their experience to other things. And, there's something that I've seen in Sydney just as a pure consumer, because I made that decision early on that the being served side of the bar was by far the best side of the bar to sit.
Yeah.
I've seen my fair share of whiskey bars, and I remember about 7 years ago, as whiskey was starting to like grab a bit of momentum, every bar was throwing a whiskey bar in somewhere, and you walk in and 100 whiskeys, and then you could pick that. Okay, you've chosen 2 suppliers and bought one of everything there. Yep. So like
12, the 15, the 18, the 21, the 25, the 30.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that's why Highland Park do it.
Well, they throw it a 17 and a 19 and 12 and a half and a 16.3.
But like just on that, because I get asked quite a bit, it was like, what's your favourite whiskey bar in Sydney? And it's like, well, your favourite whiskey bar is your favourite bar, because pretty much every bar has a really great selection. And so I just want to get your opinions. And I know like Baxter's a little bit of the exception that proves the rule of quantity versus quality, because you have both. But like, how important is it to have a whiskey selection of 20 bottles that are all great experiences, as opposed to 100 that's a little bit run of the mill?
So I worked at Bulletin Place before Baxter Inn, and at Bulletin Place we did actually have a quite little tidy whiskey selection, and it was only about 30 bottles. It was rotated. We'd kind of buy cool bottles, and sort of we'd have a selection of stuff ready to go if we needed it or wanted it. But it wasn't necessarily that we were needing to like have an insane selection, because anyone could talk and recommend a whiskey based off what the customer wanted. And so it was more about having a limited selection isn't a necessity. Doesn't necessarily determine that you're going to give a guest a lesser experience, because it's how you can sort of get what the customer wants and sort of explain to them, this is what you're after, so we've gone with this whiskey. It might not necessarily be the peat bomb that you're expecting, but has a really lovely, well-balanced peat structure and things like that. And I think a massive selection is great, and like the Baxter Inn is amazing, and like we do still have a curated selection. Like we don't just carry every single bottling from a distillery. We don't carry every single Highland Park. We don't carry every single Speyburn.
No one does. No one does.
Does the Speyburn Cellador carry every single Speyburn?
It's so limited that we give them an option of two SKUs and that's it.
2 SKUs, that's it.
Actually, even at the distillery, even at the cellar door at the distillery, they're like, we wouldn't carry all these range. Just
They sell Oban at the Speyburn Cellador.
So we kind of balancing that, and I don't think the size of a whiskey collection necessarily matters. It's great because I get people coming in and they're like, I once had this bottle in Singapore. Do you have it? And like, I've actually had it for a few times and been able to like help recreate someone's night using that whiskey. They were like, look, it was the night, like genuinely this story was where this gentleman had the whiskey. And it was the last time before he had a drink with his dad before he passed away. And so he got to have that whiskey again. And that was great. But being able to kind of give the customer what they want, even if they don't know what they want, is something that is more important than having a massive selection for me.
Yeah, I guess for me, there's a couple of good reasons to have a lot of whiskey. One is it's fucking cool. It's
like a really cool fucking shelf matters a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. Like for us, it's actually it adds prestige. So we have our whiskey displayed in a lit up cabinet that goes down one side of the wall of the main part of the menu, and straight away people come in and they're like, "That's fucking cool." You know, you get people like, "Oh, are they just empty bottles? Are they all full?" They, you know, you're like, "Yeah, they're all full. They're all, you know, stuff you can buy," and straight away it adds an element of prestige and you know, quality to the place. Like people makes them interested and excited about it. Also, if you only have a couple of whiskeys, the really interesting ones, and the ones that people do tend to go out of their way for and get really excited are generally whiskeys that you can't buy. You know, you can't go into Dan's and buy a 6-pack of it. So if you only have 30 whiskeys, you get in, you know, say your latest you know, local barley from Springbank, and it's one of your 30 whiskeys, and you're probably going to smash it out in a week or two. Having a lot more whiskeys means you can, you know, they tend to last longer.
But that's the thing. I mean, I think all of us here would agree. I mean, a curated selection at any bar is far more exciting than you hear these stories of bars where, well, we've got 1,800 bottles on our back bar, and you're like, cool. It's like you've just gone through the ALM list and ticked one of every box or something. It's like that's great, but like if you, I love it when I find a bar that's got like 30, you know, like 50 bottles max or something, and it's like, but you can tell that the bartender or the bar managers have actually really given a shit about what they're putting on the bar. And that it's like it's part of their extension of what they like to drink themselves. And Scotty, you'll especially remember the Clock Hotel. What was it called? Whiskey Room. You know, like years ago. Like it was always bits and bobs of weird oddities and interesting whiskies and things you can't get elsewhere.
Mainly old Glen Scotias from memory.
A lot of old Glen Scotia, a lot of old Spring.
The old cow Glen Scotias.
Yeah, the old cow Glen Scotias. But like he would get things like Dan Milne, you'd get things in which were sort of weird and oddities and things like that, which were, I thought it was a great bar to drink at because it was just the selection wasn't huge, but it was curated, and I like that kind of stuff in a bar though.
Yep.
And I think
there's two sides as well. Like you know, generally people who come in here interested in whiskey fall into, you know, one of three categories. They're people who don't really know anything, and you know, they want you take their hand, you know, sit down, you sort of, you know, probably start them off with a blend 12.
That's the Matt Bailey category, so we might.
Look, he's got soft hands. He's a lot. His hands don't get too clammy. He loves.
I do not have carpenters. I'm not a carpenter. I am sorry.
We find the kind of three categories. So one person is they come in, they've heard about whiskey, they've probably drunk a bit of whiskey, probably some bourbon, and they want to be, you know, they're impressed by the amount of whiskeys we have, and you know, they want us to help step them through. The other one is that comes in and they know whiskey, and they want that Glenfiddich 30, you know, or they want that, they're set in their ways. They know their brands. They, you know, you need to have something to cater to them. You know, the whole thing is, you know, if you don't have it, you can't sell it. So you do need to have certain whiskeys at a certain level and a certain price point, which will, you know, help you be profitable. Then the third ones, they come in and they want to be challenged. They want something new, which is, what we would like all our single malt whiskey drinkers to be about. So for me, I need to sort of fill three kind of spots. One is good, approachable. Everyone uses the term, trainer whiskies or starter whiskies and stuff like that. But
Gateway
it is
whiskies.
important. Gateway whiskies, yeah. You need to have enough of the big boys. The ones of brand recognition, your Macallans, your Infinity, whatever. Then you also need, obviously, the curated, the quirky, interesting, challenging, people haven't seen before, etc. So for me, they're the sort of three things I sort of keep in mind.
And I think Simon said it really well just quickly. It's like rather have 6 good bottles and some good chat than 1,800 good bottles. And I think I've walked into bars and I've seen their back bar and trying to have a chat about, I'd love to try this whiskey, and they can't even tell you. Like they don't even. You have to point out which bottle it is, and you spend more time trying to be like, that bottle up there, than them knowing anything about it. Yeah. And I think it's important to make sure that education is really it's what can kind of drive an experience much more than having a huge selection.
Massively. Yeah. And also having your bottles arranged alphabetically helps. Because even sometimes you're like that. Which of the Glens is that one? And
I think they should all be arranged by year of foundation.
So sort of Glen Turret somewhere near the start, and
But then you have like Glen Turret fighting other distilleries to sort of stay away.
It's like, wait, they claim to be the oldest one, and it's like, they were distilling illegally, which, I love that age statement of we have the oldest distillery, and it's like, but were you actually producing whiskey on the side, or was it any good back then? How many times did you set fire to your distillery before you actually stopped burning it down? Yeah. There's all these kind of, I think I love those quotes around, we're the oldest distillery or something, but it's but you've moved sites or these certain things have happened, and it's that marketing chat that I think is a really kind of hard thing that, again, education helps.
Yeah. So take the year off Macallan is what we're saying, yeah? Start from scratch. I suppose in the way that you've, talking about curating a whiskey list and things, there's very few other venues that are buying from auction sites as well as from suppliers. And that comes with 2 challenges. One, you haven't got a rep to go back to and say, this is crap, take it back and, charge me for a new one. But also it's just a minefield to know, provenance and quality and things. But you seem to have nailed it in your succession. I think there was only one whiskey that I think you and I tried where spent quite a large amount of money, and we both kind of went, it smells great. Keep it in the glass, and we'll just keep smelling it. But it's obviously comes with its challenges. But how did you go about that as a process, and what did you learn from it?
I think so. We've always kind of, the Baxter Inn originally, when they started, were ordering all their whiskies from the Whisky Exchange in the UK. They then got busted doing so and had to pay a rather large tax bill for all the importing they were doing. Yeah, but we've kind of
one through now.
Yeah. Glassware, antique glassware doesn't count anymore.
No, it doesn't.
So we've kind of always been searching, and look, I think we will make mistakes. There's one bottle that always stands out to me, and it was a Ben Nevis 1966. It was Highland Spirit, and it was a 44-year-old. And it was a 500ml bottle, and I was looking on it on an auction site, and it was about to end. And unfortunately, the UK auctions finish at weird times for me. So I'll wake up at 6 a.m. and be like, "Is it going still?" And I'll throw in some last minute bids. And I might have still had a few drinks the night before, and so bid on this Ben Nevis 1966 44-year-old. It's a 500ml bottle, and it was £200. And I was like, this is a bargain. These people don't know what they're talking about. And the auction finished, and I won this bottle. And it was 18% alcohol.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So the fine print.
You always got to read the fine print. So I've made some mistakes, and to be honest, I actually took that into the whiskey room. And whenever people were talking about whiskey in like below 40%, I used it as an educational tool. So like I ended up mostly just pouring it out to like as samples to people and being like, this is what happens when you overage whiskey, and it's a really great thing to show that not necessarily aging whiskey is the best thing. Like you can overage whiskey, and this is what happens when it goes too long when it gets long in the tooth. And so it's kind of taking those moments and being able to show, okay, we've made a mistake. How do I make this like an educational experience, or kind of be like, oh, okay, you know what? I think I've made mistakes in purchases, but I'll then make them really approachable in price. And we'll kind of be like, look, this is an interesting whiskey because whether it captures the time of a distillery. And it's one of those words I really hate when someone describes a whiskey and they're like, it's interesting. As soon as something's interesting, you know it's probably actually not that tasty.
Has a great personality.
Yeah, it's like...
That's what people say about me.
And
watered down.
So, look, provenance is a really hard one, and like we have question bottles, and I have actually sent certain bottles back. But we do bid through. Dave nodding. I did cover the LUC on that bad boy, but I made 30.
Dave in years. Dave nodding. Good to see you, mate. I haven't seen you in bloody years. Hey, hope you're well.
So like we will make mistakes, and to be honest, we do occasionally buy from private collectors, and it is a risk. And like certain bottles, I've actually contacted distilleries and kind of chased down and asked them before. Like you do get a decent lead time, so for certain bottles, I'll email distilleries and be like, hey, do you have any records of this bottle being shipped? Like we bought a Macallan from Spey Traders, which was a importer that was based up in Narembeen in the early 80s, and we could actually reach out and find them, and they had records of it, and they had records of how many bottles they sold and to whom, and we bought it from his daughter. So like there are ways in which you can track provenance, but it isn't necessarily like Macallan weren't exactly like super keen, but like you can check, like you can occasionally get they won't confirm, but they will not deny either.
I mean, Macallan are famous for, even they've made massive mistakes in their own collection. So as we know, I mean, I love the fact they made replicas of bottlings that weren't ever real to begin with.
Yeah.
So they're making replicas of fake whiskey.
Look, like I genuinely do think there will be a stage where we probably get those sour grapes, where we get like pulled up on all these bottles, and it will be an interesting thing to see, because like I've bought bottles that I've never tasted anything from 1938 before, and like I'm like, it smells like it's old and peaty and like probably actually not that very well made, but like, is it necessarily the right whiskey? And I think part of it is managing, and like I think we don't necessarily buy whiskeys that are going to represent a huge dollar value. Like I love a bottle that has a scratch on the label. I love that sort of stuff because I'm not collecting it. I'm going to it's going to be poured, and I don't care if the box is dog-eared. Like I know it does show provenance that potentially it's not being stored correctly, but I think it's really important to not necessarily, we don't buy collecting whiskey. Like if I could literally go to distilleries and be like, hey, can I buy your 50-year-old release in a bog standard 700ml bottle, and you guys can charge me less because I'm not getting the packaging that costs $7,000 or whatever. I don't need my wood desk or box that comes with this whiskey. It's still surprising the amount of packaging that we throw out at Baxter Inn every delivery day for every single whiskey that turns up.
It's quite good for me in proximity. We've had some quite expensive whiskies that come with packaging that's not quite right or is broken. Boy, did Baxter's get one of these? Because I might need their box.
I understand. Sorry,
just running up to the cabinet there to on this concept to grab a book. that's written by Emmanuel Dron, called Collecting Shop, which is for me the Bible. But the cabinet's locked, so I can't get into it.
It's an important collection, so you can't access it.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly.
Collecting the collection book.
Sorry, Tom, go on.
No, but yeah, I think provenance is always going to be something that's hard, especially when you are buying vintage spirits and anything like that. Like, I don't know whether there are ways in which we could improve the systems. Like, there are aging ways in which you can proof and check paper and do all these things, and maybe there are ways in which we could look at it better. But for me, I buy safe. We do research. We kind of review. We check photos and kind of make sure that it's like there have been a few bottles that we questioned before and we didn't buy. So if there's ever if we're anything less than 99% sure, we don't buy.
No, and there's certain brands especially that are regularly faked, and that's your Macallans, your Bamors, even probably some Yamazakis and whatnot, and even Kurosawa, I should say, that constantly. I would personally never buy a Macallan off auction. Let's put it that way. I just even if it was of some many value, but I don't buy much Macallan to begin with. But if I was hunting one down, I wouldn't be buying it off home.
It's a really interesting thing, I think, in a bar, and this is where, and I speak to the wine department, Joe, here about, this sort of thing about if you bought, Romani de Conti, and you've tried it with friends and it was a great experience, do you really want to know whether it was real or fake?
Oh,
and
that's the thing.
That's one of the big problems with wine. But from a retailer's point of view, we used to buy a bit off auction when I started about 6 years ago, because I used to do it personal, and I thought, this is stuff I don't want, but it's going to do well here. We haven't bought anything off auction for 5 years because it's a little bit different if you're selling the whole bottle. I need to be sure, and I 99% is not enough. Which I think is really it's a really interesting way that people like yourselves approach it, because there's so many of them. And talking about Kurosawas and Hanyus and Ghost Series and cards and that sort of stuff, all these labels were applied by hand, and some of them were handwritten. How do you know? Because the original can be a bit skewiff as well. So it's this absolute minefield.
Especially things like card series and whatnot. I would buy that off Ichiro. I wouldn't be buying that off any site or any other auction thing. It's not really even a conversation. I'd just say I wouldn't trust it.
Yeah,
and it is one of the hardest things to say. Even what about Decanter and Nix and all these other sites? Like, how much provenance are they tracking? Like, there are going to be bottles that just appear, and it's not to point any shame, but it's just to say that you kind of can't. When we are dealing with items of such value, there's money in faking them.
Yeah, well known in the as far as art fraud goes, that the higher you pay, more you pay for something, the less likely are you to admit it's a fraud, and the more likely it's to stay in the system, because people are paying this sort of money and they don't want to.
No one wants to look an idiot.
Exactly. So the expensive frauds keep rotating around because people are like, "There's no way I bought a fraud. I paid $500,000 for this. It must be authentic." So there's it's in their best interest not to question it.
I think I would just also say that steering away from, as you say, I love and I went to Ichiro's last year when just before the everything went to shit, and I luckily squeezed in, and I got to try some Hanyu, and I love Ichiro's, and I've tried a few card series before, but I don't think I'd ever buy one for the bar again, because of cost and because of the provenance of it. And it becomes there are still whiskeys that, even though the Baxter Inn has a lot of expensive whiskeys that we deem that are too hard or too unjustifiably expensive for our customers. And it's not to make an assumption, but it's to say, can we recommend something better for a better price?
But then again, it comes down to, as a consumer, a lot of the time you're buying the experience of tasting something that you might never get to taste again. I mean, before I worked at the Roosevelt, when Tom worked at Eau de Vie, I remember going in there, and this is quite some years ago now, and I think dropping $300 plus on a nip of Port Ellen, and that was up to that point probably one of the most expensive whiskeys I've still bought, just for a nip. But I was like, man, I'm never going to have a chance to try this again potentially. It was the bottom of one of their early releases of the Port Ellen. And I'm like, I don't care that this isn't good value. I want to experience something special that, well, obviously,
and that's what customers want. They want that.
Yeah.
There would be those who want that experience. It doesn't. It's irrelevant what the price is as well.
Yeah. No, I was at Chichi Boo just before Tom, and also one of my favorite. It's fucking amazing, man. And we rode off the trip to Japan as a tax write-off. We went to a bar in Ginza, and we did a tasting of all the card series, and it was fucking blow away. But, I think we paid like $3,000 to do this tasting. There was much of it you could drink in 2 hours, which turns out is quite a bit.
Haven't met me. I just think I could be the end to all those business models.
Yeah, exactly. There was lots of very nice, polite Japanese men and myself.
Look, we're about to jump into Prow's questions, but I do want to ask something very quickly to wrap all of this knowledge and this experience that we've espoused in the last half an hour in curation and making sure authenticity back into about time. So presumably, Tom, you have a big sort of influence on the whiskey selection there, and what is the whiskey selection going to look like in terms of numbers and what sort of things are people going to expect when they walk into Expect Time from a pure whiskey point of view?
I think it is going to be a more curated selection. Like, it's not going to be a huge sort of massive 300 bottles. I think it's going to be 80 bottles, and it's all South Trade, all Speyburn.
Good.
The Sydney Speyburn experience.
Yes,
Speyburn Clubhouse.
Big banner at the top.
But I think it's also and this is probably the thing where it's like when you open your first bar, rather than your home bar being stocked, it's going to be very empty. It's going to be a lot of the stuff that those bottles that I've squirreled away, and sort of some cooler things that I think look, I am probably not going to drink these, so I might as well put them on my bar. So I think I've got some cool long rows, the private casks that you get at when you go to the store, the Cadenhead store and stuff, and from the cabinet. And some of those cool bottlings are going to be kind of the feature of it. Stuff that is unique, I think, is probably going to be the best.
Yeah, a lot more room is going to be under my bed after we open up.
Excellent. I love those sort of curations. So let's jump into the Prouse section of this evening, which is where we ask some questions that are designed to sort of challenge you a little bit, and you take the question as it is, but no bullshit, no bullshit answers. Like if it comes up, who's your favorite person in whiskey? Oh, well, the whole whiskey drinking community. I really appreciate them. None of that.
It's interesting. It's an interesting community.
Yeah. Great personality.
So, who wants to go first? Milne, you want to jump in?
Yeah, cool.
Ready?
Kick up with hopefully a slightly easier one. Who is your hero in whiskey? Start with Ben.
Me? Shit, man. I can't remember.
Community.
Sorry.
Don't say the
I was just reading it. I mean, sorry, straight up, I'm terrible with names. But someone else going to jump straight in here. I was reading a profile on the female distiller from Lafroig, from
Bessie?
Yes.
Bessie Williams.
Yeah. So I just read a little profile on her the other day. That was pretty fucking cool. I think a lot of it was a very different time, and for her to succeed what she did then, that was really cool. I think more modern. Yeah, jump to Tom.
You've answered already, though. You've answered already.
Okay, cool.
You've answered one.
All right, sweet.
I think, and it's hard because I think one of the things that always catches me up and always kind of trips me up is the romance of visiting a distillery and getting that experience where you sit down and you drink whiskeys and you get to climb over barrels and do all these things that most people don't when they get to go on those tours. And I was lucky enough to get taken to Balvenie a few years ago, and I was peering through the family house, one of the family houses on the estate, basically, and I peered into a room, and David Stewart was sitting there. And it turns out we were having like a tasting and a thing with him. And to be honest, his kind of personality, he's very reserved and meek, and but also very intelligent and very considered in the way in which he does anything and produces any whiskey. It's not just and it's always that thing of brand people, all sort of master distillers and people involved in production always go, oh, marketing wanted this or something like that. And I don't think he made, when we had those discussions, he didn't make a lot of excuses around oh, marketing did this. He was like, oh, I thought it was actually he felt more genuine than a lot of people I've met in production.
Yeah. A lovely guy. We did a
really
tasting with David in Sydney with the SMWS, and there wasn't even any society casks. We haven't had a society Balvenie for donkey's years, so it was. But he was great, and he was. The venue weren't ready for how understated and meek he was as a presenter, and so he was wandering around the room with this giant microphone. This little man walking around with this giant microphone.
How many microphones does one man need?
Oh, I got another one.
It's compensating for something.
No, it's just having a good setup. It's about having a good setup for streaming. You wouldn't understand. It's okay.
He's got the boom and the balls.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, but it was a fantastic evening. And just members have often said that was one of the best society tastings. And it was just fantastic to have him talk about his sort of life story and everything. True gentleman, lovely guy.
Oh, awesome. The other one I should mention would be Takashiro, going up to Uichi Distillery. The coolest fucking distillery in the world. Went there in February where the snow drift was halfway up all the rick houses and everything. But looking at his, you always say he wrote the book on whiskey for Japan. When you see the actual book he wrote and his fucking handwriting and his drawings, just his little notebook. The guy was amazing. So, and again, they've up at Uichi, they still have his house which he had with his Scottish bride and everything, all original and stuff. And you look through and I mean, A, it's a really cool distillery, but B, I was got a lot of respect for the guy. Went over to Scotland and basically took everything good was about Scottish distilling. And then just stuck to his guns where, Scotland changed and, they're still up shoveling coal into the fires under the stills and, doing it all super legit.
That book just been reissued in English as of August. And so my copy is coming towards me at the moment.
Very cool.
Nowhere in Australia has it, so it's coming from the UK, I think. So it should be here by about February. So when we open back up, everyone will be able to look at it.
That'd be sweet.
Bailey, your go.
I'm going to ask a really obvious one related much more closely to your profession.
Don't you fucking dare. Still
you spend a lot of this chat talking to us about what you like most in a whiskey bar and so I'm going to ask you the opposite. I'm going to ask you, what do you dislike? What do you dislike in a whiskey bar? What do you most dislike in a whiskey bar? And that can be coming from either side of it. But what do you dislike most of it?
For me, I think being pretentious about whiskey. The one thing I hate is a bartender telling someone how they should enjoy their whiskey or what they should enjoy or what they should be tasting. I think it's such a sort of subjective thing. Part of the revenge spending after lockdown was we had some people come in and drop an insane amount of money on some Pappy Van Winkle and apple juices and then some Glenfiddich 40 and apple juices. And they said these were the best whiskey apples they'd ever had. And for me, that's
probably not wrong.
I don't know their circumstances and they had a great night. And I think a bar where they tell you that you're doing it wrong is probably the thing that I like, and that treats a customer like they need to be kind of force-fed the way in which to drink whiskey. And it's one of the hardest things that we kind of struggle with at Baxter's is when people order ice with their whiskey or when the bosses come in and order everyone Lafroig or Optimal And it's like, that's not necessarily the whiskey for everybody. And I think a lack of empathy for the person who's ordering is probably the one thing that I think is the worst in a bar.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah, the customer is, well, not always right. He's the one with the money who's, supporting the, without him, there's no bar.
That's it.
Or
Yeah. For me, I think seeing whiskey as the bar. End of the day, whiskey is a product. You can drink whiskey anywhere. The reason you go to a bar is for an experience. So whiskey, you have an experience, and whiskey is what you're drinking while you have the experience. And, don't get me wrong, I fucking love whiskey. And I have a great experience while drinking whiskey. But if it doesn't match the experience the bar's trying to get across. So like you go for Baxter's, and obviously Baxter's my favorite place in the world to be drinking whiskey. But Baxter's is also upbeat. It's dark. It's full of hospos. Everyone's having a good time. There's a real good vibe. Or you go to like a small little hole-in-the-wall whiskey bar, and there's about 6 people sitting up at a bar in Japan, for instance, and you're trying some amazing stuff you haven't seen before, but it's quiet and serious and all of that. For me, I think what I appreciate least is people who, a bar that's focused on the product rather than the experience.
Yep.
So you don't want to go into a bar and they have 300 whiskeys up, but they have no fucking atmosphere, or they have no interaction, or they have, they think they can just chuck the whiskeys up and that's going to, be the experience itself. The whiskey is just what you drink while you're having a good time. In the same way that, if I go into take it back 15 years, going to a vodka bar,
Bring it back.
I'm going to like it or not like it because of how fucking awesome the bar is, not because of the vodka on the back bar. So I think a lot of people get caught up on, I have all these whiskeys, or I'm a mad nerd about whiskey, or the whole, probably more American whiskey, but the whole hootenanny, sort of
I love my times at Cherry Pines. I think it's great.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's got to be a good bar first, and then the whiskey just makes it better.
Beautiful. Look, I'm going to put my best Alex Dahlenburg hat on here and ask you a question that she loves asking. And she's been in the chat. I know she's been busy all day. I've been trying to get her on the phone for a few things, and struck out every time. That might just be my interesting personality that's doing that more than anything. But she'll be back next week. But what is your happiest whiskey memory? We've touched on a few memories there, but if you had to pinpoint one whiskey memory from not from a work point of view, but just a personal point of view.
Sitting in the park, Lavender Bay, New Year's Eve, drinking Johnny Blue whiskey sours out of a coconut.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Basically, it comes back to the Glenfiddich 40-year-old with apple juice. I always tell people when I do whiskey classes and stuff, it's about getting enjoyment from whiskey. Like, when I was younger and you'd be working in a bar and some suit would come in and ask for your most expensive whiskey double with Coke. And you're like, oh, how could you, sacrilege, how could you be doing this? But then you realize that's probably the most enjoyable way they're going to experience that whiskey. If they want to pay their, hard-earned suit dollars over the bar and buy a whiskey, they should get the most enjoyment out of it. If it's a mix of Coke, it's great. Sitting, New Year's Eve with Tom Price here, sitting in a park, drinking whiskey sours out of a coconut.
Because the cops can't pour out whiskey from coconuts. They don't know what's in there. So it was our cheat for getting smuggling whiskey onto the street.
I can't think of anything Anyway, I would have enjoyed that bottle of Johnny Walker Blue more than if I had drunk that out of a coconut at New Year's Eve in a whiskey salad.
I'd love to know how much you drunk by the time that you thought, this is something the cops won't think is weird. Strolling around with coconuts going, no, they just think it's coconut juice.
We thought we were so smart.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so probably my favorite experience is actually, and I kind of tell everybody when they go to Scotland that this was is the best distillery to go to. When I visited Springbank, was probably the kid who was taking me on the tour, and I'd been to a lot of distilleries. I think the first time I went to Scotland on a distillery tour, I did 26 in 7 days or something like that. And I remember I literally can tell you every story about how everybody tells you how their mill has never broken, they've never had to replace it, so the company went bankrupt, and all the silly stories that you get told at a distillery. And this kid who, because it's the local jobs, it's one of the local jobs to work in the distillery, but this kid who I was his first tour, and he was passionate about whiskey, and he showed me through this distillery and was this is the computer, and it was literally just a chalkboard, and the way in which he talked about whiskey, and for a young kid was so passionate and kind of informed and engaged. And then we went back to the bottle shop down the road, and I drank, did a private tasting with him, and literally I missed my ferry to Isla. I had to stay there that night because I literally spent an extra 4 hours just drinking new whiskeys that I'd never tried with this kid, and we talked about it, and that was an experience that I think wasn't it didn't start from anything that I expected. It was such an unexpected joy, and something that still I'm talking about, and this was 9 years ago now that I did this trip, and it's still something that I think is I don't think will ever be topped.
That's a fantastic answer. We've all answered these questions ourselves in various chats over the past year, but I'd like to just quickly jump in and say that my happiest whiskey memory changed, and it changed today. And a shout out to Peter Bignell, who was jumping on the chat there, commenting about smaller bars. He sent me something up today, which is now officially my happiest whiskey memory. Don't know if I meant to show this, but a few years ago, Whiskey Fair released a thing called Bogan Burnout, and it didn't quite get here in time. It got lost in Ozpost. But today, the Bogan Burnout arrived, and boy, did the Bogan Burnout arrive. This is my happiest whiskey memory. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
And
I'm sorry, Peter, we can't do a tasting with it because this is going in my personal collection. Untouched. This is unbelievable.
Or your petrol tank.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that thing of it doesn't matter what the bottle is. It doesn't matter about that sort of stuff. It's what the juice tastes like and the story behind it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Just before we wrap up, we're going to do a quick fire round for those of us who have been to the bars. I want to get from Milne, Bailey, and myself your favourite whiskey drunk at Roosevelt or Baxter's. For me, I'll kick this one off. But it was earlier this year in that brief period of unlockdown, which seems like a dream. But the Jameson that we looked at and looked almost certainly to be a Bow Street era Jameson. Oh my Lord, that was an experience. That was such a great whiskey, and I will never ever forget that whiskey in that night.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
that's an auction bottle.
But sorry,
that was an auction bottle, so it might have been a fake.
Yeah, well, I can deal with the fake. I did have to sit next to
It was just Bushmills.
But that whiskey was a true, a very special whiskey. And it was interesting kind of putting that up next to, tasting it blind next to each other, and with Middleton and all those other kind of seeing the spirits.
Jameson for me, old Jameson is one of the true joys. Even the old 12-year-old was a great whiskey. But quickly from Milne and Bailey, favourite whiskies you've tried, favourite experiences, very quickly.
Real quick for me was just I'll give two real quick ones. In terms of one of my favourite whiskies was actually courtesy of, it may have been you, Tom, or it may have been Chewy, I can't remember, but there was a couple of drams in the in that back little sort of cellar room that we tasted through in the little caged off room out the back. And one of them was a Society Ben Nevis. It was a really early code. It was like a 78.2 or something. And I know that sounds really on brand to say that, but it was just a really special moment because it was a really early Ben Nevis. And it was one of those things that you go, I'll never get a chance to taste this. And it was just a really awesome opportunity to just chill out in that back room and taste something from that little cask. But one of my favorite Baxter memories, actually probably the most recent one, was actually at that the afters of the Australian Whisky Awards when Seamus Carroll shouted that he wanted 4 old fashions, but he said with Glendronach 15. And the bartender didn't quite hear the request properly and instead produced 15 old fashions instead of 4. And so he was buying one for me, himself, I think Scott and Karina, and they were sort of like, he's like, yeah, 4.
No, I wasn't there. I didn't make it that far after the awards. I got the borough and then I checked out. I went home.
No, well, Baxter, we kicked on for a bit, and I remember he asked for this is right near the end for me. Yeah. He asked for 15, 15 old fashions turned up, and I was like, well, more the merrier. So we each downed one, and then down the second one, and oh, look at that, there's still a third one to go each. Look,
mate, we got to push those sales. Come on,
yeah.
We make that mistake all the time.
If I was on a Brown Forman expense account, it doesn't matter. So it's all good. Andy, sorry, over to you.
If we're getting 2, I would say
or 1.
Or 3.
Drinking Manager's Dram in the vaults. I think it's actually this one that was, I think it's Aberfeldy. It's heavy sherried, which I'm not really a heavy sherry fan at all. And it was one that I had years ago with back at the Whiskey Exchange. And it's just solid whiskey. It's just that, really that one that kind of throws the difference to what the norm is. So yeah, getting to try that again was definitely a highlight. But also I really enjoyed the Baxter Inn whiskies because he's done 2 or 3 that I've tried
3 at this stage. The 4th is currently sitting in a barrel.
Yeah. But yeah, I think trying those is it's completely unique to that venue, and it's certainly the 2 that I tried are poles apart and so different from one another in that sense as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Excellent. Look, thank you, gentlemen, so much for taking time out of your busy days. And I say that jokingly to sometimes, but I can see, Tom, that you actually have stuff to do. And I've seen people like sand the roof and measure up.
This is all staged.
Yeah.
We're actually not building the bar at all. We're paying for everything, but we're telling this. The marketing person said that we should do this. There's a marketing team. There's a lighting rig.
Director.
The live video behind is great.
When you stand up and move the rug, does the back fall back and sort of park someone?
It's just Steve holding it up.
Tom has to go back to some supervising now. So
thanks, lads.
It's been a pleasure. Look, there's no need to fear because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Tom and Ben, you're both going to be still at Roosevelt and Baxter's moving forward. You're directors of this new venue. John O'Carr is going to be our the one we can harass the new venue with barrel-aged Skittle vodka and all the sort of fun stuff. Thank you so much for taking
all of
the
us
time.
will be underground at some stage, so come in. You'll see at least 2 or 3 of us there at any time. But yeah,
thanks, lads.
It's been absolutely intense, and we are so close. If you're watching this in the future, who's that? Who is that? Invader in the background. For those watching this or listening to this in the future, we are so close. We are, a month away from getting back out and getting back into venues. And I encourage you, everyone who's watching this or thing, is as soon as we can, get those double jabs, get out there and start putting some money back into these great experiences that no one else can replicate. So, and that's not a Sydney thing, that's a Melbourne thing, that's a worldwide thing. Go on, do it. I
want to get back to Scotland. Come on, people. Me and Ben are going to go to Chichiboo and make it a work it.
Yeah, exactly.
and you've only got until next year to do it because then the bar dries up and you're in a bit of trouble. Look, thanks, lad. Looks forward to sharing a drink and seeing what you look like in person again because it's been a while. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll be back next week, probably. Maybe not. Who knows? We'll figure that out on Wednesday morning next week. We'll see you all then. Okay, before you go, Tom, what's in your glass, mate? It's an Ardbeg glass.
Some alligator.
So double alligator.
Video release.
Yeah, I dropped off some samples for him earlier.
Beautiful. That's what we like to see. Thank you, everyone. We will be back next week, and drink this, be happy, and we're going to be there very, very soon.
Thanks,
Cheers, man. Thank you.